everyone, and welcome to my studio. I'm Susan Smith, Stitched by Susan, here for a super casual evening of stitching together. I even have my glasses on. It's so casual I didn't bother with the contacts. Anyway, yeah, this is just going to be a very informal, I'm working on a sewing project and I thought you might like to work on a project with me kind of evening. So what I'm working on is, I'm going to show you, it's by Janet Nesbitt of One S1ster Designs, and it's in the book Half Crazy. And this specific quilt, a country version of Stars and Stripes. So the blocks that I've got pieced already, making sure I'm on air well, yep. The blocks that I've got pieced already are the small blue stars, and I'm now working on a couple variations of the red and tan and cream stars. So, I don't know if any of you have ever done any of Janet's crazy piecing patterns, but she has a very unique method, which is not terribly precise in the sewing together, but you have to follow very carefully with the cutting and the shuffling and then the sewing order to keep them all in order to get the fabric patterns to repeat and shuffle well. And so I kind of have to pay attention to that. So the way this is going to work is we'll chat a little bit to begin with, and then when I'm sewing, I'll try, won't talk very much, and just get my sewing done, and you guys chime in, and then every so often I'll pause and catch up with the comments and chat with you all as well. So I have to point out one thing, because you know I've always got my coffee cup in hand when I'm working in my sewing room, or usually. It doesn't always even have coffee in it, but tonight it does. But this is my favorite Christmas present. You're not supposed to have favorites among your kids, but the ones that gave me an ember mug, yeah, they rank right up there. And if you don't know what an ember mug is, it's actually a Bluetooth mug. So I can turn it on from my phone and it pairs, and it keeps my coffee piping hot for an hour and a half. Isn't that crazy? So good. So ember mug in hand, let's check the comments out, and I'll change a view so that you can see me perhaps. Maybe, let's see here. No, you can't really. Check this one out. Nope, there's not a good one for seeing me. So, you know, when I'm at the computer, you won't see very much. Anyway, I'm going to scroll back through your comments and then we'll get sewing. I won't take very long. A few of you are commenting next week from today, we'll be on the cruise, heading to the Caribbean. Yum, yum, yum. Deborah Wagner, glad to catch my first live. Hello from Nebraska. That's awesome. My husband is chiming in live with no Mr. Producer. It's true. And this is the challenge today, is I am on my own. Coffee mug's going on the table. I am on my own, so I'm just jumping back and forth between camera scenes to try and give you guys a pretty decent view.
Just turn it.
Here he is coming down the stairs.
Scroll back through your comments and then we'll get sewing.
That will come through in the mic. Look at that. I can turn the camera. Crazy talk. Okay, here we are. Let's look at the comments then. I'll hang over my computer for a sec. Donna, I'm working on an EPP pattern. The pieces are 3/4 inch and this will have over 5,000 pieces. Long time to finish the project. No kidding, Donna. Let's put that up so everyone can see it for a second. Cheryl, thumbs up everyone because we know this is good. Marion, we'll see you on the cruise. Let's see if others are working on some other projects. Lynn is in hot Auckland, New Zealand. That's awesome. Somebody, Ann, typed in earlier that she was in cold Georgia, and I asked her how cold Georgia is. Because here's Angela from Athabasca, Alberta, Canada, and I bet you it's colder in Athabasca. Just saying. Anyway, let's get sewing. You guys feel free to chime in, though, wherever you're tuning in from and whatever project you're working on. I'm just looking at the camera so I can get my ironing table kind of in place there so we can see that as I'm working. Okay, I'd love to know what you're working on. We all would, and chat about it. And I'd love to hear what your favorite Christmas present that you received was too. Part of this process is to do some trimming up, so I came prepared. I've got my cutting mat, and I just have to go back and forth between cutting table and ironing surface. So that's what I'm doing right here. We should have had some music on for this episode, but it's not going to happen. It's just us chicks. Let's see. Let's get an efficient way going on here. That'll work. Yeah, so this is part of the trick with these pieces. Like I said, it's not too demanding in terms of super accurate sewing, but then things need to be trimmed up before the chunks get joined together. A little bit like foundation paper piecing, but there's no foundation involved in this. It's just regular piecing. I did just put a new blade on, so it's not that my blade is not sharp, it's more I've got such a high ironing surface and it's hard to get leverage on that when I'm trimming. And I don't know, I find when I push too hard I get out of whack. So I'll just take it slow and easy. We'll get it. So I did mention that this pattern is from Janet Nesbitt's book, Half Crazy. Janet Nesbitt has been writing patterns and books for many years. She used to be part of Buggy Barn, and now she's on her own as One S1ster Designs. But Janet is an engineer, and she pioneered this process of what she calls crazy piecing, where essentially you stack up your layers of fabric, you cut through them all, and then she has this method of shuffling them so that the prints get different in each block. So as you can see, as my star is forming, there's a different print in every section of the star. It's quite fun to do. A little nerve-wracking when you do it the first time. But a very cool result. Now I'm getting the knack of it. While I'm cutting away, because I have 22 of these to do, let me ask you guys what you think of my brand new website. And actually you can run to it now and have a look at it if you want to. In my newsletter, maybe 2 days ago, I was telling you about that. My assistant Erin and I just rolled it out. Well, first off, about 10 days ago, but I didn't talk too loudly about it first till we were sure nothing was broken in it. You just never know. You just never know in that first week. So anyway, a few days ago it went public, and I would love to know what you think. We put a ton of effort into new photographs, for one thing, particularly of me. It's not my favorite place, is on the lens side of a camera, but there you go. Had some new pictures done, and then we have new colors, new logo, and just a new look. And what I particularly want to hear feedback on is, did we achieve our goal, which was to really express the flavor of Stitched by Susan? This, you know, encouraging, teaching, accepting, joyfully creating sort of atmosphere. That's what we were trying to achieve. How'd we do? And if any of you are considering building a website, I'll just tell you this, there's no kickback in it for me, but we used a template from a company called Tonic Websites. And that was kind of the baseline for creating it. And boy, that was an incredible time saver, and just took a lot of the initial legwork out of creating it and left us to focus then on the creative parts of it. What pictures we wanted to use, what words, what fonts, what did we want to say. But a lot of the formats were pre-built for us. That was very, very cool. And that was the last one. Whoops. Okay. Now I've got to clean up the mess. We're just going to make a giant pile tonight. I moved my scrappy bucket that I usually use because it was too big behind the camera. Okay, let's see if we've got any comments. I'll get myself on camera so you can see us visiting. Look at that. You can even see the other camera and tripod. Okay, let's scroll back a little bit. Debbie, my first thoughts were, you're doing that pattern live? I'd be ripping it if it were something I had to concentrate on like that. Well, I mean, we have yet to see, Debbie, because I might be too, but I'm going to try not to talk too much while I'm actually sewing. Jane Hensley, I'm working on my temperature quilt for 2024. That's awesome. Can't wait for the cruise. Lauren, working on a veteran lap quilt. Marion is 30 in Florida. I won't read all the comments. You guys can read them back and forth for yourselves, and feel free to have conversations that don't even include me, conversations between yourself. It's all good. This is great. Angie, it snowed in Atlanta yesterday. My niece got to go sledding. I bet that was a highlight of her winter. Shelley, crocheting a rag rug with leftover binding pieces. What a good idea. Good idea. Dell is working on her first hexie quilt using English paper piecing. Good for you. Good for you. Anne is cutting a quilt top for Project Linus. Okay, I got to scooch right along. There's lots of comments. Oh, this is lovely. Joe is asking, no freezer paper on this one. In Janet's method, you do put the freezer paper on the top of your pile of fabrics, and that's what you cut through, but there's not freezer paper on every single layer, so you're not seeing it anymore. I've already used it and removed it. Lots of comments of what you're working on. Debbie, Joe. And Joe is elaborating. I did her pattern when she was designing with her sister, but those patterns were cut out on a freezer paper pattern design. Love that crazy piecing. So I didn't do any of hers when she was Buggy Barn, so I don't know, I'm not qualified to compare, but I know with mine, I did make several copies, like for every grouping of fabrics, I had a copy on freezer paper, and I ironed that onto the top layer, cut, 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 and then did the shuffling. So that's how that worked. Susan Berry, great picture on the front. Yes. Susan is asking, is there a link for advanced in your website? So it's just advance, by the way. And yes, it's under the tab that is learn. And you probably have to scroll down a little bit because there's several different things in there, my free motion quilting masterclass, etc. But the membership called advance is there as well. Yes. Stephanie, this is my first live with Stitched by Susan. That's awesome. Angie, I love this. The website is delightfully clean, crisp, and easy to navigate. Thank you. Thank you. Those were good goals, and I'm super happy with that. All right, you guys, I'm going to get sewing. So, you guys chat among you for a while, and let me put the other camera on so you can see the sewing. Boom, there we go. And you guys chat among yourselves while I sew this pile of 22 pieces together. I truly wish I had some music to put on for you, but that is beyond my skill set to figure out how to put music on at this point. My seam ripper is my secret weapon when I'm doing seams like this to be able to avoid pinning. Again, I'm not perfectly matching seams, so I don't need those exact alignment points. However, my seam ripper works like a stylus. So whenever I'm stitching over a seam allowance and it wants to push out from under my hopper foot, or my presser foot, I can just encourage it under there with my little faux stylus. And notice that I'm just leaving all the stars together, chain piecing from one to the next. That's so that I can keep them in order, and I have number 1 marked with a pin. So that's my other secret organizational tool. Well, it's not secret, but you know what I mean. I'm just going to have a look at one or two of these and see how the star is shaping up. Yep, good. I'm happy with where those align. Great. Let's try a different camera because that's not going to cut it. Not sure what happened there. Bear with me. I'm actually going to trot around my table and see if I can figure out why that camera went to sleep. And if I can, we'll reignite it. And if I can't, we'll make do with the cameras that we've got. Nope, turns out Susan does not know what she's doing enough to do that. So, making my way back around. We are now definitely going to have much more of a big picture view. I'll try and get a little bit of the stitching in place so that you can see a little bit of what's happening. And like I said, there's no precision matching of these seams necessary. In other words, no careful nesting or matching of points. But I did notice when I did my first set of stars that if I semi-carefully matched up where the seam lines cross, I get a crisper intersection in the stars. I don't really have a good way to show you that. Anyway, all that to say, if you wonder why I've got, you know, some overlap at the beginning or end of these triangles, that's why. And I just learned that by doing the first few stars. And Janet has kind of built that leeway into the pattern so that there's some excess that you trim off afterwards and square them up and center the stars. And so it's really forgiving. You just don't have to worry about it all that much. You can center that star by its points after you're finished sewing. Did you notice that I'm sewing standing up? This is my new favorite. I teach a few times a year at Stitch House in Dallas, Texas, and they were kind enough to sponsor this table for me. So they gave me this lovely sewing table. And oh my goodness, I am sold. So sold that I went and got a very small version. It's not even a sewing table. It's like a shop table, but that raises and lowers for my serger. So the few times of the year when I do sew garments or pillowcases or what have you, I can also have it at a standing height. There's just something about it that to me is so much easier, and to move back and forth between my ironing surface and just, I find it less fatiguing to be on my feet than sitting on my bum. So it suits me to a T. table is by Horn of America. They do make the best tables, in my opinion. Storage space and all the cool things. The custom-made insert for my machine. All the cool things. Like I said, you guys feel free to have entire conversations while I'm sewing without me included. That's what this is all about, just a time to be social. I'm not presenting or teaching anything. It's just a time to get together and sew. For me personally, this week, for various reasons, there were several. It has just been an emotionally charged week, and so I have been looking forward to this, just an opportunity to do sewing that has no deadline, no expectations. It's just for my own enjoyment. Last week I was sorting and organizing a little bit on my shelves and looking at things that are partially done. We don't have any of those, do we, on our shelves? Anyway, I was sorting out a few of those and I ran across this quilt. I had started it at a retreat a couple of years ago, and it's been sitting cooling its heels since then. And I thought, oh man, I remember how much I love that quilt. I want to finish it, so here we are. So yeah, no expectations for it. No particular destination in mind for it even. Just a fun project for myself. Just one more. Now I'm snipping them all apart, but you notice because I had them all chain stitched together, they do not get out of order. They can't get out of order. They're all in a string. So even though it looks like an unorganized heap, I still know exactly what order they're in. I love chain piecing for this reason, even with quilts that do require keeping things straight. It can work very effectively for keeping things in order. And here's my first one with the pin. Well, where are we? There's the pin. Pin intact. Okay, I will shift the camera a little bit and we'll go have a peek at comments that are coming in. All right, let's see. Carol's working on a horse quilt for the fall show. Luda just finished a baby quilt for my daughter. Used edge to edge meandering with loops. Awesome. Another grandson coming. Great. Joe, looks like you've done a few of the crazy techniques. Awesome. And Joe is suggesting make the crazy stars and stripes for quilts of valor. That's a great idea, Joe. I suspect that, let me change the camera so my head's in there. I suspect that it will not measure up to their size requirements, but I'm not positive about that. So I'll ask. I have sources. I love this. Angie, doing my own quilting is aspirational for me. Anyone care to share how you got those first stitches in? I'll let some others share first, Angie, and then I'll chime in while I'm doing my next batch of sewing. Sharon, Western Australia, not sewing as we're driving to Perth to gather stuff for my recently completed sewing studio. That sounds like fun. Nita's waiting for 3 quilts, waiting their turn on the long arm. Good grief. So excellent. Oh, look, here's Erin. You guys, congratulate Erin. She's the sidekick that helped me with the website so much. I mean, really, let's be honest. I helped Erin a little bit. That's really how that worked. Cheryl's asking which model of Bernina. It's the 770 QE, Quilters Edition Plus. Lots of you are chatting with each other. That's great. Nita's saying the iPhone probably needs to be reset. And I think you're probably right, Nita, but for me to reset it and then get it to hook up to streaming again will just take too much time. So we're going to just pinch hit it by this way. Shannon's asking, what does EPP stand for? A few of you are answering, English Paper Piecing. You can Google that one and find lots of information on that. Goat Quilter's working on hand applique blocks. Paulette, horn sewing tables are made about an hour from me. Our local quilt shop will be carrying them this year. That's awesome. They are high quality tables. They're super pricey. I honestly don't know if I would set out to get them for myself because I'm that frugal girl, but since one was given to me, I have absolutely fallen in love with it for sure. Cheryl, my hubby and I went to an antique store today. I bought a nice A.C. Williams Co. iron with handle. It's really nice. How cool is that? Nana is asking the pattern. I'll come back to that in a moment. Thanks for reminding me and asking. I'll say it again. Debbie's asking, how was everyone's Christmas? I want to hear about that too. Susan Berry's asking, do you know when you'll be back at Stitch House? Yes, I do. It's March. I believe it's 6 to 8. They made a post about it today, and also you can always look at their schedule, and it's posted there well in advance. Lee says, Christmas all put away, trying to clean up the sewing room. Again, I didn't read all of these, but I'm so glad you guys are chatting with each other. That's what this is all about. This is so good. So good. Okay, what's the pattern, Nana is asking. Let me switch you back around to my ironing surface. Okay, here's the book that it's in, Half Crazy by Janet Nesbitt of One S1ster Designs. And the specific pattern is this one pictured here. And the name of it is, I think, Crazy Stars and Stripes. Now you know the rest of the story. So the little blue stars, which I already had a few finished, and now I'm working on the red stars, and they're in a couple permutations so that the stripes carry through. So some of them are red on the top, tan in the middle, red on the bottom, and some of them are all of that reversed. Pretty cool. Did I mention Janet Nesbitt is an engineer? And it shows in her patterns. It honestly does. They're so well thought through and so original in the way that they're built. Okay, let's get to pressing these. And I know everyone's going to ask, so I'm just going to tell you, I'm using a One S1ster iron. Also a steamer. I love this thing. But I do need to move my cutting mat, don't I? Before I start pressing. The joys of doing multiple things on one surface, right? Away it goes. Off to the end. I love my steamer iron too. Before I press those, I'm going to sew this other batch though. Hang on, I'm trying to keep organized here, right? Let me turn this around again. We'll be back at the sewing machine again. I'm going to sew this other top batch here first. And my little black bit here is just a leader ender so that I don't get thread nests on the back by starting with loose thread tails. That's all it is. Well, a couple of you have chimed in tonight that you're looking forward to the cruise next week, so a few of you I know will be there. That has certainly been part of our week, Mr. Producer and I, getting ready to start packing. We haven't actually packed yet. We're just gathering all the things, and oh my goodness, there's a lot of goodies coming along. And of course, when you're on a cruise ship, you can't just nip down to the local quilting shop. So I have lists and lists of lists to try to not forget anything critical. I had lunch with a quilting friend yesterday, and she recently sewed, not quilted, but sewed literally through the side of her fingernail and finger. I'm curious, have any of you done that? I never have. I've had a fairly bad rotary cutter accident, but I have never actually sewed through a digit. I'm seeing comments come in about the sewing through the finger. Now I'm anxious to read them. And I'm going to finish all these little seams first. Last one. And again, I just sew onto my little scrap of fabric. It's actually a scrap of binding. That just holds my thread tails nice and secure so they don't get tangled when I begin sewing my next seam. I didn't have a pin in number 1 of this segment, so I'm going to put a pin in it. Isn't it the Bolt movie that does that? Just put a pin in it. Okay, let's see what's happening here. Oh, look at all the stitches. Oh boy, oh boy. Nana, I hit mine with my long arm, 5 stitches. Oh my goodness, the pain. I feel so odd with my head kind of turned. So let's see if I can turn this a little bit and be halfway on camera while I'm talking. There we go, a little better. Michelle, I was sitting in a class when the lady beside me sewed through her finger with her Bernina stitch regulator. Ouch. She was so calm about it. Bless her heart. Goat quilter, I have and stitched my finger to underneath a quilt when hand quilting. I have done that one. Literally taken a stitch just through the epidermis, through that top layer. I have done that. Angie, I've sewn through my finger at least 3 times. Oh my goodness. There's a bunch of you. Oh my goodness. Joe, when I was a teen and learning to sew right through my index fingernail, didn't stop me from wanting to sew. So awesome. Jan, that happened to a student during a class I was teaching. That would be terrible. The shop owner whisked her away to the emergency room after taking the needle out of the machine. Oh my goodness, here's another one. Lisa, never sewn through my finger, but did hit a high spot which broke the machine needle and hit my eye. ER visit, but okay. Gosh, I'm glad. And Nita, yes, at age 5 and again at 64. You know, you're spacing them out quite nicely. You should be good without another one, I would say. Joan Banco embroidered her finger during a live program. Okay, I've done some crazy things on my live shows, but I have yet to sew through my finger. Thank goodness for that. Barbara, I used to get up in the middle of the night when I couldn't sleep. One night I did sew right through my finger. Oh my gosh, did that hurt. I had to snap the needle to free my finger. Lesson learned. Ouch, ouch, ouch. Oh, you guys. Okay. I can't read them all. I'll be here for a while, but oh my goodness, wow. All right, meantime, you guys, I'm pretty sure I did make a mistake in that first batch. Now, the question is, did I do it on all of them consistently? It's not so much a mistake as I didn't love the way I lined them up. Okay, let me show you what I mean. I was talking about Janet's seams not needing nesting or perfectly lining up, right? I got to keep these set up the right way though. This is the seam I was sewing. Whoops, let me turn my camera. This is the seam I was sewing across here. And it's this intersection here that I want to be close to matching, right? So back over to my table. And I see that on the first couple I sewed, I kind of forgot that I had figured that out the first night. So I'll show you. See right here how far misaligned that is? So now the decision has to be made to change or not to change. And Susan is deciding not to change it. You might decide something different, but that's what I'm deciding. Where's my Ember coffee mug, you guys? I need that. Oh, beautiful. It's still smoking hot in there. Okay, now let's go iron. Did you notice I've got my little freezer paper here and it's got my star printed on it? You can hardly see the pencil lines, but it does help me to stay organized as to what is where. So I am pretty careful about keeping that lined up. Let's do some pressing. First, a sauna. And just all I'm doing as I'm pressing is just keeping them organized exactly the same way so they're all pointing in the same direction. I've got my number 1 star marked, so I will not lose track of where I am in the sequence. Now I'm pressing the seams to one side. And I might eat my words yet. The first 2 stars were quite mismatched. I may redo those. I'm not meticulous about my piecing, but I do like to be pretty careful if it's worth doing. Oh, I forgot to turn my camera, you guys. So sorry. I'm sorry. There we go. My mother used to say, if it's worth doing well. And she was absolutely right about that. See how nicely this one lines up right here on this seam? And I'll show you that first one again. See that? Much poorer. Hopefully I'm getting that in camera. Yeah, I am. So I might come back and redo that first 1 or 2. But I'm going to keep them all in order. So I'm going to go ahead and proceed with pressing them all. And you can see how there's quite a little jog in the corner here. That's because I shifted them a little ways. And you know, when you think it through, the way that Janet has you cut these stars, you're not really cutting with a seam allowance. You're literally just cutting the star shape and then sewing seam allowances. So it's not possible for them to all line up. But again, as I said earlier, she's really built that into the pattern. There's enough extra fabric that when all the block is put together, you can square it up. And I'll show you one that I do have squared. She gives you the exact measurements for squaring it up, and you can center the star in it from left to right too. So it looks perfect when it's all said and done, but it does not have to be, the seams don't have to be perfectly aligned as you're doing it, or the edges more accurately. So it's all good. I was able to purchase a kit for this quilt, and I was so glad because I don't necessarily have this volume of these country pinkish reds, you know? And so getting them as a kit was the answer for me. And by the way, if any of you would like the scraps from this kit, you should email me. Let's actually ask you to email Erin. Poor Erin. support@stitchedbysusan.com. I've kind of decided that I'm going to start doing that more frequently and not keep multitudes of scraps because I have so many already. So there are some goodly chunks left from this quilt. So if one of you would like to have the bits that are left, first person to email Erin is the winner. Okay, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to flip my pile over and I'm going to undo the first and the second one. And I'll know which is which because my first one has pins in it and my second one doesn't. So I'm going to undo just those two and redo that one seam. That's worth it to me. Everybody has their own tolerance level. I've hit mine with these. I've gone right over mine. There's my trusty seam ripper. So I like to press the seam flat again before I go to undo it because it's hard to sew it together well if the seam is pressed. There's that one. And I'm going to go ahead and sew it together right away so I don't get confused over what goes where. And I'm going to shift the pieces a little bit till that middle seam is overlapping nicely. Shift my camera around again. These are the joys of doing a one-man show, one-woman show. Got to remember, but I know you guys will remind me if I just look at the screen from time to time. This one does not have the pins, so therefore it is number 2. Much better. Much better. Okay, moving the camera around again. Sorry. I'm trying to keep up on it. After I get this undone, we'll have a peek at the comments again. Some of you probably have tips for undoing. I typically get my seam ripper in there and run it along, but because this whole seam is bias on both sides, I've tried it and it just pushes things out of shape. So I'm playing it safe. Endeavoring not to stretch that bias too much as I handle it too. There we go. Okay, let's shift those seams just a touch. Back to the sewing machine. There's number 1 with the pins in it. Whoopsie. All right, boom. Now let's lay this on our pattern. Make sure they're all going the right way. I forgot to turn it when I was pressing, but there you go. They are. You can see the 2 points of the star. This is going to be my top seam. Now this is one that's going to need to be evened off. Can you see that? There's jogs at both ends. That's fine. Just where I'm going to join them, I'm going to trim that up evenly, but first I'm going to press this batch. Come on with me. Are you getting seasick yet from moving the camera? Now this one, this is going to be my joining seam, and knowing what was coming, because I've done some of these stars already, I was able to line that up even at the angle. I was able to make my seam allowance be where that intersection is, so I have a pretty nice straight line on that, and with luck, I won't have to trim all these as well. Hopefully. I was going to check for comments. Well, let's finish pressing these. Now that we're this far. I watch other people doing live shows, So Becca, for example, and she seems to always have her computer to hand and be reading the comments as they flow in. I don't know how she does that, but I'm curious if any of you have read or remember the book Cheaper by the Dozen. It was about a dad in particular, but in some respects a couple who were motion experts. And they were always looking for the most efficient way to do things with the fewest motions possible. I read that book probably when I was in my teens. And I tell you what, that has stuck with me my whole life. I'm standing here setting down the iron between every block, and I'm thinking to myself, there is a better way. I do not have to set down the iron between every block. There's a more efficient way. Okay, there's all those pieces, and they go this way. Let's turn our camera. All the way around to the computer. And let's have a peek. Okay. Diana's asking, homespuns from Jubilee Fabrics or Stash? They're hard to find these days. They're actually all Janet Nesbitt's own fabrics. She designs for Henry Glass. I suspect that they're several years old. I could look when this book was published. I bought them as a kit, and I've had it for a couple of years. So let's see if I can figure out when this book was published. It does not say right at the front. Oh, here we are, 2018. So yeah, it's been a little spell. This is the book that I'm working from, Half Crazy. So that's what the fabrics are. Dell would like to know about the Laura Star iron. Okay, when I circle my camera around that way, I'll talk about it a little more and remind me if I forget. Okay, Dell? And Laura's asking about that too. Absolutely. Laura, I'm finally here, but would love to see this. And remember, Kim, this is not a teaching by any means. It's not a how-to. I'm just showing the pattern I'm doing and my work as I progress through it. Ooh, Susan, I had an ember mug and forgot and put it in the microwave. Don't make that mistake. Oh gosh, no, I will not. Kim, looks like there were some issues in the frog, as in the rip it stitch is coming into play. Yes, yes, indeed. Kim is saying I cut every 3 or 4 stitches and they pull apart pretty easily. depends on SL. Okay, tell me, Kim, what is SL? It's not seam ripper. Stitch length? That's what I'm guessing. I have a pretty tight stitch length. I have 2.5 on right now. Debbie, I think Becca talks more than she sews. I enjoy watching her too. I did not think anybody talked more than me, Debbie, but good to know that there's someone else who perhaps does. Anne, Stitched by Susan, at least you don't have to stoke a fireplace to keep the iron hot. Okay, funny story, Anne. You may have heard me talk about my growing up years before, but I grew up until I was in my teens. We did not have electricity or running water, so I absolutely have made quilts using a wood stove, heating the sad iron on the wood stove to do my ironing for the quilt. I absolutely know how to do that. Okay, let's talk about the Laura Star iron for just a sec. This is the iron itself. It's a crazy good steamer, as you see, but not that hot. So this is the defining feature, I guess, of the Laura Star system, is that in your, my cutting mat's in the way, in your canister, or if you have their big apparatus, there's a tank on the ironing board, steam is formed in the apparatus and steamed again in the cord so that you get this hyperfine steam, almost like a gas, closer to a gas than droplets of water, right? So that's why I can put my hand in front of it and it does not burn me. And also it will not scorch your fabric. I've not personally done it, but I've been told you can actually leave the iron sit and it won't scorch. I don't know. I have a silicone mat and I always rest it on there. But what it does so well with that steam is it irons sort of through all the layers. So for example, used to be that when I sewed a seam, I would first press it flat, right? And then I would press it open, and sometimes I would press on both sides or put a clapper on it in order to get a flat seam, where this iron does that all with the one step. So it is a time saver. It's an investment also, but it is a time saver if you do any volume of sewing. Okay, I'm gonna get my cutting mat back up here and we're gonna trim up these seams. Poor thing. Good thing this is my old kind of trimming mat because it's curling up laying on the floor. But I think it'll be okay for an hour or so. All right, where are our blocks? Right here. Number 1 is now on the bottom, which is perfect. I'm going to work through these from top to bottom, and then number 1 will be on the top. And my rotary cutter. So what I'm doing is trimming this top edge. That's what I'm going to sew to the next segment of the star, and I need this to have a straight edge in order to sew a flat block. It doesn't matter where it is precisely in terms of if my ruler's up or down, but I need it to be straight so that I don't get a curved seam. So that's why I'm going to trim it. And I am going ahead and judging by the seam along my stripe right here to get my ruler parallel to that strip. So that's the only gauging that I'm doing. It's not a particular size. I just want to be parallel so my strip runs right through the middle. And when the block is done as a whole, I will pay attention to that as well so that it stays with the strip running nicely parallel and not veering upwards or downwards on my block. That's just personal preference. I like it to look, I want the stripes in my Stars and Stripes quilt to be straight and not running uphill. I do love all these reds. They are so pretty. I'm curious from some of you, what are your favorite rulers, particularly in your, not talking quilting, but in your cutting work? I have not been a collector of rulers in my years quilting. So I have this 3x18" ruler that I use for most things. And it's only fairly recently, like maybe 2 or 3 years ago, that I invested in one that will do a whole width of fabric folded in half and clips onto the side edge. And those are my only 2 long rulers. I'm curious, do you have must-have rulers for trimming up? For trimming up straight things particularly. I do have a few rulers that are block based, like the block lock ruler, for example. What are your go-to rulers? After this trim, we just have the one more seam, and then these red stars are done. Then I have one more set of red stars to do. There were 4 sets in total, although this set is kind of a double one. So I cut them out with 11 layers of fabric. And for this set, I put 2 stacks together. So this was 22. This is half of them right here. And I've already got one set of 11 done. Then I have the other set of 11. And I'm ready to start assembling the quilt after that. However, I don't think there's any chance it'll get finished before the cruise. Go. That one was a little wonky because of my pins. I was being super careful of them. Okay, bottom of star and top of star. All right, gonna move you back around. We're gonna check out the comments one more time, and then we'll sew these stars together. Let's see. Erin, yes, stitch length. So I was asking what SL meant in Kim's comment. About every 3 inches, 3 stitches cut for a 2.0 stitch length. So in other words, if I were undoing a seam, I would go along and about every 3 stitches, I would snip, snip, snip with my seam ripper, and then I could just pull the thread from the other side and it would come undone. Good point. Erin, you freaked me out holding your hand in front of that steam. Trust me, I did that off camera long before I ever did it on camera, but it totally works. Cheryl, 144 watching, 56 likes. Thumbs up, everyone. Yes, I appreciate that, Cheryl. Thumbs up just helped me to get more people enjoying the show. And Joe, how will you display this project when finished? Well, I'm not sure, Joe. One person suggested that I donate it as a Quilt of Valor, and I do work with that organization a bit, a quilt for them, more than sew for them. So if the size is big enough, that's probably my first choice for what I'll do with it. But also, my husband is an American, though I'm a Canadian. He loves American flags, so I may hang it in my home as well. So we'll see. Kim is saying, Quilters Select, ruler brand. Love that they don't move when you cut. I might have to give one of those a try. I don't usually struggle with my ruler shifting too much, although today, when I have my table higher than my usual cutting surface, I certainly did struggle because mine don't have any kind of grips on them. So interesting. Shelley, I love the square up rulers by Eleanor Burns. Eleanor Burns is such an icon. Everything she does is pretty wonderful. Dell, I really like the iron. Might try to add to my studio. Be on the alert, Dell. They do run coupons and sales every so often, and the Laura Star is now fairly closely associated with Bernina, and so sometimes, like at Bernina, in their booth at a quilt show, for example, sometimes you'll get coupons or have a deal there, so watch out for that. Make that easier for you. And Creative Grids 6.5 by 24 is my most used ruler, so quite a bit bigger than the one I'm using here. And mine that I cut with the fabric with would be that size too. And it has the little ledge on one end so I can butt it up against my cutting mat. I do love that one. Goat Quilter, I just got those True Cut by Grace and the ergonomic rotary with the guide. Those are awesome. Really like the rotary cutter. I'm curious about that. I've actually never used one of those ergonomic ones. They seem awkward to me, but so many people swear by them. I need to get up the courage and try them. Diane, love my Stripology squared ruler. Makes cutting strips and cross-cutting squares a snap. Great point. I've not done that, and I know how well they work because for those of you who don't know them, they have a whole lot of slits cut in them, I think at a 1/2 inch spacing, and so you can lay them over top of your fabric and just zoop, 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 zoop without repositioning your ruler, right, for cutting multiple strips. Question from another Susan. When you have a roughly border and use your hands or canned goods to work that out, must you take off the ruler table to do that on the long arm? It certainly works better because the ruler table is so big and then your can or your weight is so far away, it's not really putting enough pull on it. So when the ruler plate is off, you've got a much smaller nose on your long arm, so it works better. I'm not going to say you must, it's not wrong, but you'll get better results for more extreme problems when you take that ruler plate off. Few people like the creative grids. Yep, good. Lisa with a whole bunch of sizes. Yeah, so good. Creative grids too, they're just a classic and they do things really, really well. Nita likes the block locks too. If you've never used a block lock for trimming angles like half square triangles and things like that, they're wonderful. Wonderful, wonderful. Kim, Amanda Murphy can get you a refund if you ask her first before you go to the dealer. Now, are you referring to the iron, Kim, or to rulers? I assume the iron. And Kim has an 8.5 by 24 ruler that she uses more than anything. That's awesome. I've not seen one. I don't think that's that big. Okay, you guys, got to get sewing. I've got my camera set up. Yes, I do. So last seam, right? We're going to sew the 2 halves of the star together. Let's make sure that my pinned number 1s are on top. And this is why I look, and this is why I pin. When I look at this section here, the bottom half of the star, here's my pin, noting my number 1. When I look at this pile, guess where my number 1 is? Well, I saw it. Where did it go? I did. I swear I did. There it is. It's on the bottom of the pile. So that tells me I've got to reverse this pile. And could I just flip them? Yes, I probably could. But I'm going to go ahead and reverse the pile so I have number 1 on top. And that's because I didn't do the extra step of trimming this one, right? It didn't sort of reset the order. So I will just quickly reverse them. Then I've got number 1, and I'm confident. And if I didn't do that, what would happen is in some stars I would end up with fabrics that repeated. And I don't want to do that. So if you are new to the channel, this is kind of an unusual live with me sewing. Much more often I am at my long arm during my live sessions, but in all cases, I call it Quilting's first reality show because I make no pretensions about being an expert about all things. I'm just here to have a fun time relating to all of you, particularly tonight. So when I'm quilting, usually I'm working on an actual client project. And I just walk you through the process. So it's not particularly a lesson. It's just letting you in on the process as I'm working through it, the decisions, the choices, etc. And I am now taking out my number 1 pins because they are getting in the way of my seam. And after I get these sewn together, it doesn't matter what order they're in anymore. Anyway, if you're enjoying this live and unscripted format, I would really appreciate if you would give the show a thumbs up. And if you want to know when I'm going live next, then click that little notification bell and YouTube will kindly let you know. Also, if you sign up for my newsletter, I do try and give at least a day or 2 of heads up whenever I'm going live as to what it is that I'm doing. I try to include a photo of the project as well so you have an idea what's on tap, so to speak. I will not be doing another live and unscripted quilting until after I'm back from our January cruise. So sometime early in February, I expect, will be the next free motion quilting episode. I know many of you watching are long armers too. I don't know how much you long arm for other people, but this past week I had a guest blog post on Diary of a Quilter. That's Amy Smart's blog. And it was about my best tips. I think there were 11 of them for prepping your quilt for a long armer. So if you long arm for other people, even if it's for your, your mom or your daughter or your sister or whatever, I encourage you to send folks to that blog post, and it's got some good guidelines for how to prep your quilt for the long armer. And we've just run out of bobbin thread. No worries, I have another bobbin all ready to go. Just trim that thread tail. Now I'm just going to overlap my stitching 1/2 or 3/4 of an inch. I personally don't love to do reverse stitching just because I feel like it makes a lumpy seam allowance. So I prefer instead to do a fairly short stitch length. I have my machine set on 2.5. And you notice at the beginning and end of my seams, I do not do any reverse stitches. And I don't typically have trouble with it. I do treat my pieces gently so as not to pull those seam allowances open, but it works well for me. This time these entire blocks are getting heavy off the back of my machine, and I'm just going to pull them up because, again, it doesn't matter what order they're in anymore once they're entirely assembled. That doesn't matter. That one seam is kind of crumpled up. Let's press that flat. Another seam that I didn't get quite flat. It gives me great personal pleasure to have a quilt that has beautiful seam allowances on the back. Doesn't always work that way, but over the years that's become a kind of pet goal of mine. Make my seam allowances look beautiful in the back of the quilt too. Actually, it's kind of a curious question. I was talking about inviting you to share the blog post about prepping for your long arm or tips. I would love to know, actually, how many of you do quilt for other people? And it doesn't necessarily have to be as a business, but just, you know, do you quilt more than 1 or 2 quilts a year for other people? Is that a significant part of what you do? I just added up my 2024 quilts the other day, and I wasn't sure what that number would be because this last year I put a lot of focus on spending time teaching via my courses and interaction with my students, and I thought, yeah, I wonder how many quilts I actually did. Anyway, officially the number is 102. So that's an average of about 2 a week. Not too bad. I mentioned earlier on, I'll mention it again, I have a certain amount of scraps left over from this quilt. I would love to give those away to someone who is, particularly the reds, to someone who loves this style of colors and quilts and Janet's fabrics. And so, if you are interested, if you've got a project in mind, email us, support@stitchedbysusan.com. Let us know what project you've got in mind. Or if you're just, you know, beefing up your stash, that's okay too. And I will choose someone from those responders and send you a package in the mail. Well, first I'll respond to your email and get your address, so don't put that in there though until I have notified you, okay? So first off, just say, yay, yay, pick me. Scraps are such a beautiful thing, and I love scrappy quilts. But I make more scraps than I could ever dream of sewing, and so I would love to share some of them. I'm actually stepping over to my ironing board to trim a couple of these top bits of the star. I noticed on that last one it has a bit of curvature and I didn't like that effect. It's hard to get a flat block when you don't have 2 straight seams to join together. I'm going to finish this batch of blocks and press them and show you the result. And then I think we'll call it an evening for tonight. So before I go, I will recap the pattern that I'm using and who it's by. But if you have any questions, last minute before I go, this is a great time for them, or any comments, and I would certainly appreciate a thumbs up and even sharing the channel if you love this style of very casual quilting together. It's definitely my style. And one last block. That's it. Let's trim them apart. In no particular order. Gosh, I'm having a hard time here. Oh dear. I do want them all to be facing the same direction. That's more efficient when I go pressing. One more little stack. There they all are. All right, let's see what the comments are. Carol, ran out of bobbin also, so we'll be done for tonight. You know, that's as good a reason as any to call a halt to an evening. Oh, I love this. Lala, just acquired a used long arm and I'm excited to try my first quilt. That's so, so fun. My best advice is don't be scared of it. Just dive in and start playing with it. Work on your not so precious projects first and just dive right in. That's the best way to learn. Diane, my first visit to your live. I'm so happy that you are here, Diane. Debbie, one thing I've been working on is putting my fabric on comic book boards. I got new bookcases to put them on so I can see what fabric I have. Going to shop my stash more this year. I've seen so many already in the first week and a half of January. So many people on Instagram and Facebook that are doing exactly that, that are offering quilt-alongs or support to encourage us to quilt with the fabric that we have, that we already know we love, right? Use it and enjoy it. Angie, my preferred stitch length for piecing is 1.8. Oh wow, that's really fine. I'll have to give that a whirl, going even smaller than what I typically do. Karen, hi from Australia, just joined and watching from my sick bed. Good vibes. Okay, we are sending all the good vibes your way, Karen. Absolutely. Okay. Diane is asking, have you tried Flatter? That's a pressing agent, right? And I have not. I actually do have a homemade one. I've written a blog post about it that I make actually with vodka, which is a form of starch. And it works super well. I was frankly too lazy. I would have needed to starch all the fabric before I did the cutting, and I just didn't. So, well enough for me. Lala, I'm intimidated with the used long arm, but I'm telling you, don't be. That's exactly how I started actually, was with a used one as well. And I started first with just yardage, and then with quilts that weren't super precious to me, and just learned by doing. It's the best way to learn, for sure. Michelle, I make t-shirt quilts for others. Elsie, I quilt for others, but not a business. So many do that. And I long arm 6 to 10 Project Linus quilts each month, all very simple designs. Good for you. Bruce, 102 quilts. Yes, that was my smallest year in a while, but yes, I did get 102 done. Michelle, I feel the same way, but my seam allowance is on the back, nice and orderly. Stephanie, quilt for others is gifts mostly. I have a mid-arm and I'm still a newbie. You know what? We all started right there, so it's all good. Lots of you are quilting for people. I love this. I love this. Good, good, good. Joe is mentioning wovens can be a bit more tricky to keep in line. They are. They're somehow a little bit looser weave. But again, this is not a hyper precise piecing, and so it's turning out just fine in the end. Okay, Cheryl, I love everything you do. Thanks for that, Cheryl. This has been fun. Thank you. Yeah, Diane, if you started a picture of the quilt, I'd like to see it. Yes, I'll show you that on the way out, what I'm working on exactly. Lauren, thanks for sewing with us. Have a great cruise. You bet, you bet. This is so awesome, you guys. Beautiful. Okay, there's lots more comments coming in. I won't take the time to read them all, but I will show you what it is that I'm working on one last time. Let me get my camera turned around a little better, make sure that it shows up. Okay, here's the book, Half Crazy. Yep, Half Crazy by Janet Nesbitt, One S1ster Design. And the specific quilt I'm working on is this one here. And Janet gives instructions for this. It's kind of a bonus quilt, I guess you would say, because you get more stars than you need out of the repeating fabrics. So both of these, really. And it is called, let me give you the name, Crazy Stars and Stripes. So that's the quilt that I'm working on, and I bought the fabrics as a kit directly from Janet. They are all her prints. She designs for Henry Glass. And so here's a close-up look at some of the prints. So let's take a quick peek. I'll press one of these stars open. I've got my whole cutting mat apparatus here, and I won't move it. But I've got one of these stars, which I will press flat. Whoops, I should have blown my steam off first. Then I wouldn't have gotten the big wet patches. Okay, let me do a nicer one for you without wet patches, all right? Hang on a second. Okay, here's the finished block. And you can see that the edges are wonky, right? There's nothing square about it. That's because when you cut the star, I don't have the paper handy. When you cut the star, there aren't precise seam allowances. And then when you put it back together, it all goes a little bit wonky. But then Janet gives instructions for trimming up and centering the star when you do it. So this is the end result. This was part of my first batch. So it all works in the end. It all works in the end. Okay, you guys, thanks so much for joining me. I am going to call it a night. Once again, if you've enjoyed this episode, would you give it a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel? And I will see you next time I go live. Have a great rest of your evening.